whatever you feel is appropriate. But yeah, I mean, I remember when we first started out, we were like struggling just to get one subscriber that we didn't know, and
Took
it's
a
like,
while.
we were talking about just, oh, how amazing, how crazy would it be if we got to 100? Here we are. We did it.
Every other subscriber of someone that you didn't know personally, like, oh yeah, great, yeah, we finally got one. No, that's my friend. No, that's
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
cousin. No, that's.
You can go
But we
back
did it.
probably.
We made it.
Yeah, I got to a point where I was like asking you if so and so, if you knew so and so.
Took about 9 months. We did it.
You put it like that. No, you're right.
It's the root of all evil, of strife and upheaval. But I'm certain.
But whatever, that's we love all our subscribers. We think it's, I remember seeing this one thing. I thought was very insightful. It was a Twitch streamer or something, and they had like 6 people in there, and like somebody was commenting, "Oh, look how sad and pathetic that is." And it's like, what would we come to today, where if there was just 6 people hanging out, like playing video games or whatever, we wouldn't think any of it. That's essentially what's happening. But if you have less than like 5,000 or whatever people kind of watching you play a video game or whatever it is, then it's something to look down upon, and that's ridiculous. So I'm trying to remind myself. I mean, there's people out there who find value in that, and the fact that there's even just like 1 or 2 makes this really fun and exciting to do. But you do have to remind yourself about that. You fall into this trap just mentally that, like, if it's not a million or whatever it is, then it's not worth anything. And I don't know what the psychology is around that, but it's real.
Everyone wants to be famous, surface level at least. Like, no one wants to put the work in. If someone thinks about doing this, it's like, oh, I want to be like Joe Rogan or whoever, someone at the top all of a sudden. And it's a lot of work to get there. And, work is not really that fun to do, especially like for years and years to get somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely a grind. It's kind of too weird where you're talking about being famous. I think Steven Pinker pointed out that I guess people are really driven at their core by status and I think rectitude. So just kind of be morally right and status, and being famous is a form of status. But yeah, to kind of the other point, yeah, it's totally a grind. I mean, I just imagine what the graveyard looks like, not a month into kind of people starting a podcast, but like 6 months in, 9 months in.
Right.
And you're still grinding out these episodes, but you don't feel like you're going anywhere. That's where you kind of, all the glimmer, the fun, the exciting stuff is sort of behind you. So you got to find fun you have to find value in the process itself. And I personally have that, frankly. I'm going to sit across and you're going to give me an update of what happened in the markets over the last week. And that's valuable to me personally. And then
like, just as time has gone on, it's like we're definitely settling into like 2 different styles here.
That's true. I mean, I find value in them. I don't know what that means from like if you were going to design the perfect podcast, if that makes sense, because we're not giving the audience sort of the same thing every week, which is probably a good thing. But I mean, the same format. Like the audience doesn't exactly know what to expect until they figure out that we alternate, like, and our styles are different.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Mine, I kind of find something that I'm sort of personally interested in knowing more about. I research it and then I relay what I found. And I'm naturally curious, so it serves me well. But I find that like I'll read a book or something and it'd be interesting, and then I'll just forget it like a year later or something. And you sort of wonder like, what's the value? What's the value here? But now if I'm going to look into like the Ray Dalio book, maybe I can
say,
maybe I can actually add some value. I mean, what do you got for us this week?
Lo and behold, yes, talking about the trade deals a little more. That's really what's going on in financial markets still right now. It's really the driving force, and things are changing a little bit. It seems like we're starting to hit a little bit of a steady state. And by that, I mean, whenever Trump began his term leading up to it, he seemed very confident that this is going to be fast. This is going to be easy. I'm going to renegotiate trade with the whole world and everyone's going to bend to my will and I'm going to do it in like a month. It's all going to be great. But we're seeing now just how difficult that is. I don't know how many months in now. There's effectively no trade deals. There's one with the UK, but that's like one of the US's biggest allies, and the US has a trade surplus with the UK, which that's the other motivating factor, narrowing the deficits. So that's the only deal that we have so far. We're seeing that dealing with China is turning out to be far more difficult, I think, than Trump ever could have imagined. He was talking big and talking tough, and it's difficult to know. It's like, how much did he actually believe how easy this was going to be versus it's a tough reality. The world's two largest economies both have a ton of leverage in very different ways. How can it not be super complicated? All right. First and foremost, what we talked about 2 weeks ago now, big new piece of drama was that the courts had apparently struck down the majority of these tariffs that Trump effectively unilaterally imposed. It was stayed the next day. Now, just this week, a federal appeals court held up that decision to stay this ruling for now. So here's the actual order. It's very short. It doesn't really say a whole lot. It just says that the court concludes that these cases present issues of exceptional importance, warranting expedited. I can't even embarrass myself trying to read legal terms out loud.
En blanc.
En
En
banc.
banc.
What is that, French? I totally walked into that one.
Sorry. I don't know.
Expedited en banc consideration of the merits in the first instance. I don't even.
You just said it so confidently. It shocked me a little bit.
Anyway, yeah, that's all it said. It is ordered that the motions for a stay pending are granted.
This is great. Yeah. Okay. I know we have a focus on putting primary documents so that you can make your own decision, but this is not really what we were going for. Like, can you read this? I can't read this. Make your own decision. Great. This is great. So it can be pronounced en banc or en banc for American pronunciation, or in banc for British. On the bench. It refers to a special procedure where all judges of a particular court hear a case.
All right. That makes sense. So, like, it's.
You know what? Judge for yourself.
Yeah, judge for yourself. That said, we could go there, or we could just go to a decidedly easier reading comprehension level here.
Yes. A Trump tweet. Thank you.
There we go. Tariffs, all caps, can protect itself. Great important win for the U.S. So, yeah. That's it. That's just a fact. That's just an update. That's where we're at. So I assume now this is just going to be a long, protracted legal battle. If we start getting updates weekly, maybe I'll leave it alone until something actually happens. But for now, we are en banc.
En banc on this seat right now.
All right. Yeah. So we are figuring it out. All right. This is good.
Hey, look, we're not going to pretend to know something we don't. Okay? That's why you come to the Root of All Evil podcast, for us to figure it out on this.
Something that we do know, though, we are back to more trade talks with China this week. 2 weeks ago now, the Trump team, not Trump himself, and the Chinese team, not Xi Jinping himself, they met in Switzerland and they agreed to a framework. They essentially had concepts of a plan. They met again now in London earlier this week, and they similarly have concepts of a plan again, with the only key difference that Trump and Xi spoke on the phone ahead of time. So I guess that was kind of a step forward, but otherwise, it was very light on details. It's like inching towards starting to do something. And so in the context of Trump feeling this is going to be so easy, he's going to do it so quickly, what we're seeing is just the total opposite of that. Extremely complicated, a lot that goes into it. It's going to take a very long time.
So this was the first step, the framework by which we will then approach and discuss growing trade. But first we had to get sort of the negativity out, and now we can go forward to try to do positive trade, growing trade, and beneficial to both China and to the United States. President Trump's got to approve it. The Chinese side has to take that back to their president. And then once that's done, we will be back on the phone together, and we will then start to implement this agreement.
But do we have any breakthrough? Any?
Well, I think we have the two largest economies in the world have reached a handshake, right, for a framework. We're going to start to implement that framework upon the approval of President Trump, and the Chinese will get the President Xi's approval, and that's the process.
We've reached a handshake for a framework for a deal. Like, how much more can you qualify that about, okay, we came together and talked, but we didn't actually cement anything?
Yeah, do we have any details on framework? I mean, it sounds like we know what the broad topics are. That's the framework.
Right. It's very fuzzy on details. So the biggest takeaways, I think, was China lifting some of those export controls, like on rare earths. And then in exchange, the US would then similarly lift some of the export controls that have been in place for a longer period of time. For what it's worth, Trump's statement was, deal with China is done, subject to final approval with Xi and me. Full magnets and necessary rare earths will be supplied by China. We will provide China what was agreed to, but he doesn't specify what that is. And he just says, including Chinese students using our colleges and universities. So like I was saying, I was trying to find exactly what that meant. And there's another clip of Letnick talking. I'm not sure if it's even worth it to go into, but he makes the point that the US's export controls will likewise be removed as the Chinese export controls are removed. It was all very vague. It seems to me like this is something that was done kind of frantically without a whole lot of actual agreement happening. The only real detail that came out of this was the rare earths export controls from China to the US. So to me, that just shows a lot of focus by the US on that specific piece. So I guess this is touching on the broader question, though. It's like, who has more leverage in this situation? So now, as it's been evolving over the past few months, at this point, who has more leverage now?
Yeah, it kind of feels like just the way you described it and what we've looked at recently, like they did a pretty stark judo move. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like they upped, they found the tender spot in the US, the rare earths, and they squeezed really hard, and then we gave up the chips and we just got the rare earths back. If I were to summarize, that's kind of the current take. That's not good.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the way that I've been thinking about it. But it's really difficult just because it's so vague. But if that's truly the case, then yeah, that's a net positive for the Chinese, and basically you're just flat for the US. You didn't really gain or lose anything. But also there's the time component. Trump needs to get this done fast. US politics are on this very fast, very tight cycle. You got the midterms coming up in 2026, whereas Xi Jinping really has no deadline here. So if he can play this slow and steady long game, and this might be a perfect example of that, just waiting it out, drawing things out. He eventually got a net positive here over the past 4 or 5 months here, a little bit of pain along the way. But as of today, that looks like a better spot than the US is in compared to China over that same time period.
Well, see if he approves it. They approve it.
Yeah, we'll see. And, then we'll just have another round of talks in some other European city. They'll give out press conferences that say nothing, and we'll just keep going.
And we'll keep reporting it right here. You got some CPI data?
Yes. On the topic of tariffs, people are still upset about inflation. So we just got both CPI and PPI this week for the month of May. So now this is 2 full months in since the global tariffs have been put into place. Now, they've been much less than we thought they were going to be, or at least as implied by Liberation Day. But there has been the global 10% minimum, which is quite substantial, and the back and forth with the Chinese. So for some period of time, at least, it was over 100% tariff. Now, last time they said it was lowered to 30%, but just recently Trump said 55% here. It's not super clear what it is, but tariffs are definitely far higher than they were ahead of time. You could definitely make the argument that it's still too soon to see feed through into consumer pricing. But the fact of the matter is we just haven't quite seen it yet. And in fact, inflation overall remains by and large on its disinflationary trend that we've been seeing for about the past 5 or 6 months or so now. So just glancing at this pretty quickly, CPI increased 0.1% after 0.2% in April. So it went down a little bit. Over 12 months, the yearly rate was 2.4%. So looking at the seasonal adjustments here, we're on the same trend here pretty much since February. We were increasing starting from last summer up until the second half of 2024. that we previously talked about. But we've been in a pretty solid disinflationary trend since then. Fell a little bit, bumped back up in April, but now we're a little bit down again in May. And then similar for the yearly rates. The headline went up a little bit from 2.3 to 2.4%, but the core remained flat again for the third month in a row at 2.8. That core is still at a post-inflation, post-2021 low ever since inflation began. And then that headline is just above it. All in all, we're still a little bit above the Fed's 2% target, but at least compared to the past few years, it's nowhere near as much of an issue as it was at that time. Shortly after we got the PPI, the producer price index, it was also pretty low. So it says advanced 0.1% in May, following 0.2% in April and 0.1% in March. So we're really pretty low as well, kind of right in line with that CPI number and far below where we were in 2022, 2023 area.
So is this just if the consumer price index is the price of goods that consumers buy, is the producer's price index the same thing, but stuff that like businesses buy, like business to business as opposed to business to consumer?
Effectively, yeah. So that's one of the things where, you might expect to see an increase in the PPI if, for example, if companies are not passing along the increased pricing from tariffs to the consumer, if they fear that they're going to lose business to their competition, they want to be the ones that don't raise prices, then you would expect to see some sort of bump in these numbers. But we just haven't seen that yet. But again, it still is quite early. People talk about how some of these like shipping containers can take like nearly a month just to cross the ocean to get from point A to point B. So a lot of these things could have been shipped already like a few months ago at this point. So the initial purchases really haven't been hit that hard by new tariffs yet. But this is something that we'll continue to watch closely. It's really important for everything that Trump is doing here. If he gets into a position where he's playing hardball with everyone and seeing limited results and seeing inflation start to increase, he's going to be in a really tight position. On the topic of inflation, again, so we not only had CPI and PPI, what we call the quote unquote hard data, what we actually observed in the market. We got some more soft data this week as well. A couple of months ago, we talked about the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey and Inflation Expectations Survey. And if you remember, this was the one where we saw a really sharp increase in that inflation expectation. So the 1 year out inflation, people before Trump came into office, they were expecting around 3% or so, maybe even in the twos. And then it shot up very quickly to like over 6%, and it went higher than it was in 2021. So people are still pessimistic, but not quite as much. So Luke, if they were expecting 6% or so a couple of months ago, what do you think people are expecting now after we've had some Liberation Day, after we've had some fluff talks with the Chinese?
4.
Yeah, I wish. But no, so we're at about 5. I think this number was like just over 5. We were just under 7 before, so we're kind of shooting down just as fast as we shot up. Is this a case of the respondents to this survey kind of overreacting a little bit? I think you could definitely interpret it that way. At that point, you're talking about what's the survey methodology, who exactly are they talking to? I think a better question is, though, what do other surveys say? And look, I wouldn't come to one of these episodes without at least, 4 or 5 new inflation prints to talk about.
Yeah, really.
I might be boring, but you can't say I don't do my homework.
Not consistent. That's right.
So we've done this one before, too. Yeah, inflation expectations from the New York Fed. Just zoom in here a little bit. Previously, back in April, so let's say rather from February, we're at 3.1 up to 3.6 as Liberation Day was underway. And now most recently, we're back down to 3.2. So we've got the same shape as we were looking at on that University of Michigan survey. It's just far less pronounced here. And in fact, we're at 3.2 now. That's a little bit elevated and, still not something the Fed wants to see, being that far over 2%. But actually, throughout all of 2024, this level was ranged between 2.9% briefly and all the way up to 3.3% back last April. So we're not seeing evidence yet in the hard data, and even in the soft data, people are starting to calm down a little bit. So I don't know. What do you think, Luke? Life is good, right?
I mean, how much of this is going to be influenced by just the media, would you say? I mean, how much do you think the media by itself tomorrow, if they decided if they wanted to rile people up and they just did like a very well designed and implemented, just, I don't know, let's just say I call it a campaign, a media campaign to rile them up. How far do you think they can move those numbers themselves?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we're definitely seeing some sort of effect like that at play here. Because, I mean, look, these surveys are asking people, what do you expect inflation to be? You know, you can answer it in two ways. It's like, okay, I'm already seeing higher prices at the grocery store. I'm already feeling the pain. So I think things are going to get worse from here. But if things haven't even begun to get worse yet, on what basis do you have to think they're going to get worse? Now, I don't think everyday people are really following play by play that closely all of these different economic indicators, certainly if you're not even in the field of finance or economics or anything like that. What's your primary source of information then? Media, or I guess today social media, all these different flavors of, I don't know, let's just say non-primary source information. There's definitely some level of bias in there. Now, I don't know if it's the legacy media doing something, making some campaign, like you said, or, you know, it's just, you know, nowadays people get a lot of their news, for better or for worse, from social media, from TikTok, from completely unverified sources. But I would say, I guess, just by virtue of seeing such a stark divergence between what we're seeing in the hard data and what we've seen in expectations, and in fact, now we're seeing those expectations start to come back down to earth, I think a lot of it has been influenced by the media. And so, you know, legacy media, social media, all this different stuff. Now, I might be eating my words later on if later this year we see CPI start to gradually tick upward and it does become a problem. At that point, it'll be interesting to see, do some of these expectations precede some of those increases? That would certainly change my point of view. But at this point, we just haven't seen that yet. All right. What do you think about just kind of bookending the Ron Johnson thing from last week? I don't know if you saw this, but, you know, he just kind of came out and said similar things to Bessent, and he flashed around a couple pieces of paper, which I thought were kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is pretty neat because during the Ron Johnson interview, he made reference to the charts and stuff that he showed Trump, and Trump said, "Oh, they're great. They're great. Now, maybe these are the same charts. How could they not be?" Scotty.
He got beat up on a lot during this.
Did he? Oh, you got to give us a highlight reel.
There was one where he makes a point where he's like, Senator, the higher decibel level does not increase the veracity of your comments, or something like that.
He used the word decibel. How many times is the word decibel going to show up?
This guy just starts.
Oh,
like,
this guy!
like,
I did start.
This
I
guy
did start
is
watching
just
it.
Ridiculous.
Oh, I did start watching it, and like, so I guess they got like a Republican and they got a Democrat, and man, I don't know how to do this. Just grab some of the biggest, most hyperbolic statements that he makes in there. Countless millions. It's like, okay, so millions. It's like, absolutely catastrophic bill. It's going to annihilate the country.
In this room to hear from rural Oregonians about this bill's catastrophic Medicaid cuts. There's a legislative wrecking ball about to devastate the lives of millions of Americans.
Just one after the other. You could just read a statement.
The other biggest things that was just, you know, this is a tax cut for the rich, and just in so many different flavors over and over and over again.
The Joint Committee on Taxation found that under the House bill, high earners who bring in several $1,000,000 a year will get tax breaks of $250,000. This comes from the people that we asked to do the analysis. So if we got to make choices, who are you with? Are you with those high earners that the Joint Committee on Taxation found? Or do you think it's more important that 2 million hungry kids in America have enough to eat?
Senator, I think you're playing a game of semantics here. You're using absolute.
Why don't you just answer the question?
Why don't you ask an honest question?
It's Joint Committee on Taxation,
because we are talking absolutes, and the answer is percentages. With TCJA, the top 10% share of taxes went from 37% to 45%.
I asked a very simple question based on the independent scorekeepers about who you value, and you're not responding, and I guess that's your constitutional right. Let me move on to tariffs.
And like it got to the point where this guy Wyden was just shouting at him for like a long period of time.
The political theater, it's like insulting. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that this is more of a reflection on how they view the American public than anything else. Like, I think persons of action. You remember that like great quote? Got to slice that in here from The Princess Bride. It's like you and I, we're men of action. Lies do not become of us.
We are men of action. Lies do not become us.
Well spoken, sir.
But yeah, no, this. I mean, it's insulting. Personally, as like an American, to be watching stuff like this and thinking that this has like the effect that they want it to have, as though like we're just too stupid to realize that when they say countless millions, that it's bullshit. Okay, that it's like
these small tweaks to their bill, countless millions of people across the country.
I remember that. I just remember that one because I sort of giggled. But like, this is his opening statement. He wrote that down. You know, like somebody proofread that and read it and said, yeah, we're going to go with this. Did this like Democratic leadership or something like sign off on this? Is they're like, okay, we're going to just be completely hyperbolic and just not have serious conversations because there's camera pointing at us? Like, what? I just desperately want to know what's going on behind the scenes in like their strategy sessions. I would love to hear it. If anyone knows, please. Like, do they think does this work? I don't get it. I'm completely not connecting with that guy.
It's all political theater, but like, who's the audience for this?
It's supposed to be us. We're the one who.
But how many people are actually watching these things? Because they are hours and hours and hours long and usually just extremely dry.
Okay,
so I don't think people are really watching them.
No, they're not. They're not watching the whole thing. That's true. So maybe what the angle is here, it's just get sound bites. Get sound bites for the media, and just get like watch Mr. Wyden destroy and annihilate Scott Bessent. I mean, that's like, I mean, if we did that, we would have way more views. I mean, that is an approach.
And police officers all over this country because we can't pay for it. Because the Treasury Secretary discovered somehow that domestic discretionary spending is only 15% of the budget, and therefore you can't balance it there.
Well, sir, we had a referendum on November 5th.
You certainly did. I agree with
policies. Your side lost.
I agree with that.
And a higher decibel
And I'm a rare Democrat who doesn't blame Donald Trump for winning. I'm sad he won. I don't blame him for winning. But don't come here.
In your statements.
Go ahead.
They have veracity.
Go ahead, Mr. Secretary. What?
Higher decibel level does not give your statements more veracity.
My statements are true, if that's the word, if that's what you mean by veracity. My statements are true. You blew a massive hole in the deficit when your predecessor.
And it just keeps going. U.S. political theater at its best, I think.
God, I can't watch it. This makes me cringe. It's really, I'm sorry that you have to watch this stuff. I every time I do, this is what I do. Like when I want to do, I look for a transcript. I can read a transcript. I can't watch them. I guess YouTube gives you a transcript, but it's not great because it doesn't have like who's talking. You want to get like the official.
But like at least you have that. At least you can Control F.
No, I get that. But like if you want to try to like consume it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't do it.
God.
It's just very high effort to do so. And, you know, I guess that's one of the benefits, you know, presumably that the fake news media brings.
So when you say fake news, I can't tell if you're saying that ironically or not. When you say fake news media, what do you mean?
It just means the media.
Okay. This makes me sad. Damn, because like it could be really constructive. It's an important conversation, but man.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. I think it's pretty interesting that
our colleagues on the other side of the aisle now, when they're not in charge, are all concerned about massive deficit spending. I think it's appropriate to have a little history lesson here. I put together a report that shows, I didn't have time to really blow these charts up, but this shows that under President Bush, his 8 years, he averaged $250 billion a year. Buster-proof majority, and they blew the lid off of that. For the next 4 years, we averaged deficits of $1.27 trillion. First time we ever had a deficit over $1 trillion. That sparked the Tea Party movement. I'm part of that. It's still way too high, but reasonable compared to today. COVID hit. We had a massive bipartisan spending spree. $3.1 trillion deficit. We went from $4.4 trillion of spending to $6.5 trillion. Now, a responsible president, responsible party in power in 2021, as the economy recovered, unemployment came down, would have returned to pre-pandemic levels of spending and deficits. But that's not what happened. Instead, under President Biden and Democrats in charge, they averaged $1.9 trillion worth of deficits. So again, we went from $661 billion in 7 years, COVID, then we've averaged $1.9 trillion in deficit spending over the last 4 years under the Biden administration, Democrat control. And unfortunately, this is the projection, CBO's baseline projection over the next 10 years, another $22 trillion worth of deficits, averaging about $2.2 trillion. That's the problem. And again, here's the chart that shows that. 4.4 to 6.5. Now, I don't know of an American family, honestly, if they had an illness, had to borrow $50,000, pay medical bills, if that family member got well, they would keep borrowing $50,000 and spend at that level. But that's what Democrats did. We never went back to pre-pandemic levels like went up to 41%. But by 1948, we were down to 11.4%. They realized you can't continue spending. You had to get back to a pre-war level. So my question is, I've given you this draft report. I want to release it hopefully next week.
I want that report.
Yeah, he's got that World War II point again.
Yeah, good thing our audience knows about that in depth, what happened there. Yeah, the secret was raise a bunch of taxes and then don't cut them. So, that is interesting. Like they talk about how they raised, deficit spending. That's an interesting point, actually, because they raised taxes a lot in 1942 and they never lowered them. But they said they brought the deficit back down, or they brought, government spending back down, but they kept the taxes. They kept the taxes.
Prior to that period, like there was years where only the rich got taxed anything.
13, I think the 16th Amendment was passed in 1909, ratified in 1913. 1913 was the first federal income tax.
And then years after that, it increased materially and just never came back down. Or I think during the All In podcast, they made the point saying that, there's economic studies saying that you can't get more than like 20% of GDP in tax revenue. And I think his actual quote was something like before hitting growth problems. And I think that's kind of the point right now. We either have to increase taxes and take that pain, or we're just going to keep overspending and it's going to become unsustainable and we're going to have that pain forced upon us. And so that's a good transition into Dalio.
Yeah, I think I cut this out of the last episode, but maybe the link to Dalio would be like the COVID spending that they highlighted there had to do with what Dalio was referring to as monetary policy level 3 or MP3, in which the only way to stimulate the economy after you've gone through MP 0, 1, and 2 is to start leaning on the fiscal spending. Pushing on a string is a term that book used a lot, and it was quoted back in the 1930s, I think, when they were trying to use the central bank to stimulate spending, and it just wasn't doing it. I think that's where it comes from. But pushing on a string is an interesting image. And the only way it works is with fiscal spending. And Dalio has sort of pointed to the pandemic as an example of us getting into the very late stages of the long debt cycle. But we'll see if we can break that apart really well, I think, next next week.
Sounds good. I'm excited for that, Luke.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about it. I'm not sure how to cover this or what to focus on, because there's a lot. But Dalio does give his own recommendations. He does use the number 3 quite a lot, actually. So, tip off to Bessent. Maybe they had a conversation about this or whatever. His idea of a beautiful deleveraging, I think we need to get into. And what he basically says is you need to do the deflationary impact of cutting fiscal spending. So he's saying cutting fiscal spending, but at the same time, you ease monetary. So, Trump's recently been coming out and saying cut interest rates. And that would be a nod. I think Dahlia would agree with that if you also cut the fiscal spending, because the fiscal spending will be a downward pressure on the economy. You cut fiscal spending, but you also got to restructure debts. So you start sending them out long term, ease up on the payments, ease monetary, and lower spending. So lower spending is going to hurt the economy. Easing monetary policy is going to help it. So that'll kind of help. And then the restructuring the debt will hopefully ease the burden too. That's broadly his recommendation. And Trump saying to lower the rates is sort of a nod towards that. But we also have to do the fiscal spending part coming down, which did not happen. It's full gas. Like if you start doing that, you pedal to the metal and you're going. So anyway.
Sounds like a pretty good preview.
Yeah, there's your preview.
Excited to hear the next chapter of that, Luke.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. So show up.
Hope everyone else is as well.
Yeah.
You know where to find it.
Where, Joe?
Right here on the Root of All Evil podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Luke.
We'll see you next time.